Welcome to the Recover You podcast with Kylene and Patrick. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome everyone to another podcast episode of Recover You,
where Kylene's going to be awesome and spew. You didn't let me finish. She's just going to spew. So she's going to spew tremendous wisdom. Is that what they say?
No.
What do they say when they rap? Is it you're spitting
facts?
Spitting. I don't know. I guess spitting can be more disgusting than spewing.
I feel like we should start over. This is not.
No, this is good. This is a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff.
Boy.
All right, let's roll with it. Let's go.
And cut and welcome everyone.
Welcome everyone. Where Kylene is going to be talking about wisdom.
Is that what's happening? No, today we are talking about facing the unknown. And this is just something that I thought would be a really good discussion to share some different perspectives, because it is one of the fears. Facing the unknown is one of the biggest fears that I see. I would say women, but I think it's humanity, right? I think it's one of, like, if you look at all of humanity and just people in general, a fear of the unknown or facing the unknown is one of the biggest fears that we struggle with. Then that if you see somebody that is stuck in life, stuck in patterns that they don't like, very often facing the unknown is one of the greatest fears. It's keeping them in that place. It's putting them in freeze, right? And, it makes sense, because when you've gone through a lot of pain in life, when you've gone through a lot of trauma, when you have trouble trusting people or trusting yourself and all of these different things, you develop like a coping mechanism of needing to control, right? And what's so ironic about that, just speaking from personal experience, is the more you try to control something, it's like the less control you actually have. It doesn't typically end up helping the situation.
Right.
It may briefly make us feel empowered, or I don't know the words to use there, but it makes us feel maybe a little bit safer on some really shallow, basic level. But I find, as somebody that really struggles with control and that aspect of life, like it just shows up everywhere, where I'm just like, okay, I really need to learn how to release control in this area. I really need to learn how to like trust here and let this go. And, let things like move through my body and, relax into life a little bit more, And so what I find, the reason that really consistently hits me as the thing that I need to grow into consistently, is because anytime I am trying to control something, it typically does not benefit me the way that you wish it would when you're trying to control something.
Right. That's right.
And so we're going to talk about that today in context of the relationship as you're going through recovery, because whether you want to reconcile with your partner, or whether, deep down you want to separate from the relationship, but you're scared, we get it. And actually, we're going to share kind of our stories about this, as well as some other examples of this, because, we've both been divorced and we've both been reconciled. And so having that perspective, both are scary. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that I sort of want to start with is this idea of, if you feel stuck, maybe this is the episode for you. And if you feel stuck, then part of the reason that you feel that way is probably because you're not happy where you are. And the reason you're not happy where you are is because you feel like you are not living into the purpose that God created you for. Like, there's a part of you, however small or however large, that is knocking on your heart going, you are born for more than this. Mm-hmm. And you're not living into it.
Right.
And it's true. I find that when it comes to purpose in life, when it comes to doing things that are big, that are bold, they are almost always scary. There's almost nothing in life, I feel like, that comes with high value that does not also come with a lot of fear and insecurity and like, what if something bad happens?
Yeah. You hear the wisdom being spewed? The wisdom spews. So
terrible word.
It is pretty bad word. But, as you're talking about this, if I can relate it to my professional life, I've had the good fortune to be in charge of a lot of organizations and to develop organizations and start organizations from scratch. Mm-hmm. And I can say with 100% certainty that the times where I managed and led loosely and allowed the people in the organization to make decisions within a vision, within context of a vision, the organization thrived well beyond what I could have imagined. The times when I have been tight for whatever reason and been very highly directive, controlling, the organization did not grow
micromanaging. Maybe
it did not achieve the success that I wanted, and people didn't grow and develop, and then there were bad outcomes, higher turnover, a worse safety record, more cost, all those things that you don't want in a business. And so, if and we're going to get more into the personal side of it, because one of the things that's really interesting is my personal growth, or my personal growth has helped my ability to do that professionally as well. And so, that it's just been interesting to me over the 3 decades of leading, that I've noticed that as I look back, the times I've been highly controlling have been dark periods in that organization's life cycle.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing about control is that I'm trying to think of a situation where it's positive. I think control is the what's the word I'm looking for? The desire for control, or the need for control. Let me clarify that. So the need for control is almost always negative, no matter where it shows up in your life, whether it's professional or interpersonal or whatever. And so when you see, like, if you just see on like a relational dynamic, right? If you're trying to in any way control your spouse, that is never going to go well, right? I feel like I have to put like a little caveat here, because when you talk about boundaries, people go, well, that's controlling your spouse. It's not. It's creating your own personal space, and we've kind of talked about that a lot. But yeah, when you're talking about the need for control in different areas of your life, it's almost always more damaging than rewarding. Right. And if you think about it almost as like this, as an energy, it's a negative energy. And the opposite of that is, I think you could use a few different words for that, but the opposite of that would be freedom. The opposite of that would be flexibility. The opposite of that would be trusting God, trusting the universe, trusting, it's a positive energy. And so those things are always more scary. I think relaxing into the unknown, which is what we're talking about, like facing the unknown, relaxing into the unknown, I think it's terrifying.
It is.
It's really terrifying. But it tends to be worth it, because you only have, if you want to talk about control, you only have control over yourself. And so maybe that's what I mean, is like when you're trying to control something outside of your reaction, your responses, your behavior, that is almost always negative.
But, there's a situational component to all of this. So, for example, if, I gave the example of organizations I run. And so let's kind of tie it to when you're teaching a brand new pilot to fly, right? You don't want to be like, hey, listen, I'm not going to control you. Here's the keys to that airplane. You go have fun, right? That's going to lead to a bad outcome, right? So the controlling nature is, hey, I'm going to be on the controls with you while you execute this maneuver, because you just don't have the experience. And that's a very loving,
that's kind, nurturing, though. I don't think that's like, that's educational.
Way, right? So then you can kind of parlay it to the situation.
And they're asking you to do that. That's right. That's guidance.
That's part of teaching. And you can do the same thing, like a brand new leader in an organization. If you say, hey, I need to teach you some of the ethics of the organization. I need to teach you some of the habits of the organization. And I'm going to show you these things. And then over time, I'm going to let that control go as you learn and go through it. So the same thing happens in betrayal, I think. The betrayed may say, I don't want you on your phone. I'm going to hold your phone from here on out. And that's very appropriate. It's very, very appropriate, because there's a situational component to that control. and you and I have talked about this, but
and I think that's
5 years
mutual, right?
That's right.
And it's also accountability.
That's right.
And so that's not me like forcing something onto you necessarily. So there's
there has to be a change in the control as recovery grows. So if the same things that are in place on day one of betrayal are still in place on
6 years into recovery,
6 years, there's something going wrong there. Either the relationship is not recovering the way it should, or the addict is not taking accountability and learning the way they should, or the betrayed is not getting into a healthy situation in spite of maybe all the signals of massive health, on the part of the ex-addict, that, you know what I mean? So it's like those are they situationally, things need to change and evolve and grow.
Though I think you're talking about boundaries and accountability, and the reality is we don't have control in those situations, because ultimately, like if I say, hey, don't take your phone into the bathroom, that's an accountability thing. That's a trust building thing. That's not control, because I don't have control there.
Right.
And if I tried to control it, typically that's not going to go out. The only thing I have control over is, okay, well, if we agree on this and you say you're not going to do it and then you do it,
and there's consequences.
Well, yeah, the consequence is my response to that, right? My response then is, okay, well, there's lack of trust in the relationship. Then I respond X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we're talking about facing the unknown, I think, it really is scary. I remember when we were going through, when we were going through discovery and I started learning all of the statistics and I learned about addiction, it was just so overwhelming. And then one of the things that was so scary to me was like, okay, I found out when I was 35 and I hear the statistics of 2 to 5 years and I'm going to be 40 by the time I have any health in my relationship again, or in my life, or, happiness and all that. So I was facing this huge unknown. Well, and in a lot of other ways too. I wasn't just facing the unknown of reconciliation. I was facing the unknown of, at any moment in any day, something could happen that would then change my trajectory right to divorce. Right.
Yeah.
And so what option did I have though, but to live life?
Yeah, you have to.
And eventually I had to focus on healing and start to, trust into the process and then allow it to unfold naturally.
The way it's going
to. Yeah. And so we have a couple quotes that came up kind of as we were talking about this is, the idea of, if you love something, let it go. I feel like that's like a early 2000s like song or something that was in, like a song lyric. I don't know, but it's the whole idea of like, if you love something, let it go.
I think it was a Rick Astley song.
I don't know who that is.
He's the never gonna give you up.
Oh.
Never.
So if you love something, let it go. If it comes back to you, it's yours, right? That whole idea, right? But then also the whole Henry Ford quote, the power of whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
You're right.
And okay, so when you're talking about facing the unknown, one of the things that happens is it's this fear, right? Well, I don't know what my future is like if I change my current situation. And so I choose to believe that outcome is negative. Well, if you believe that outcome is negative, you're absolutely right, because you will live into that. And the power of belief is your mindset around things is so powerful. It really is unbelievable how true that is. If, it's when people think that they're capable, they're capable. When people think they're incapable, they are incapable.
That's right.
And I do want to put a little comment in here saying, I really don't want this episode to come across as insensitive or non-empathetic to people that are in very difficult situations, because I understand and that there are so many horrible, difficult, hard situations. And so, take what we say, to your situation. If it resonates with you, it resonates. If you disagree, and just delete it. But, to that point, Patrick and I have both been through divorce, and we've been both through reconciliation, and we've both had little and we've both had a lot. And so we've been in situations where both are true. And so, we want to speak into that a little bit, because when we had little, we made difficult decisions. When we had a lot, we've made difficult decisions. And so I don't, there's so many examples of the environment that you're in not dictating the outcome. It's not the environment that you're living in that dictates the outcome. It's what you do with it. And there's so many examples of that. So we're going to talk about a couple of those today, but I wanted to start, when we're talking about the fear of facing the unknown, changing that. I think on the other side of that is really aligning with, what do you think you are here on earth to do? Are there things in your current situation, in your current environment, that you are not able to accomplish and to contribute to the world and to contribute to your family and to contribute to life, and to yourself, that you're unable to do in your current environment? That if you made a different decision, or if you faced the unknown, you would have the possibility of then doing. Mm-hmm. And so if that is you, that I think on the other side of fear is millions of possibilities, right, many of which are beautiful, wonderful things that you could never, ever, ever, ever anticipate. And that is why we try to control it. We still won't achieve it, right, because so many times these things that happen in our life that to help us fulfill this purpose are actually coming from, it's when we relax into that, it's literally when we relax into the unknown and sort of trust that God has a plan, or trust that things will work out in a way. And then, of course, we're taking action towards that purpose. But so many other times, other humans are involved in that, right? And so we cannot control the outcome to the level of detail that we want. All we can do is put it out into the universe, essentially, as people would say, right? Like, this is my goal, this is my desire, this is what I want. I'm going to start moving in that direction, and then, make decisions as different events begin to unfold, right? Based on that. So I kind of just want to talk about some examples to this. And do you want me to share other outside examples first, or do you want to share kind of our?
I think however you start, it will be very wise.
Oh my gosh. Okay, why don't we start with your story first? Okay. Because you really went from having nothing, and making really hard decisions, and kind of coming fairly, I would say, not late in life, but one of the things that I hear a lot is this fear of age, right? Because I work with women on a wide variety of age range, all the way from very young to in their 50s and things like that. And 50s is still very young, by the way. Mm-hmm. I actually really believe that, because what I see in every decade is the same fear. I'm this age.
Yeah.
How am I going to recover from this at this age? And it's like, right, well, people in their 30s are afraid of that, as well as people in their 50s are afraid of that, right? And so I think it's just a human fear. Well, I've built this up, or I've done this, or I've saved this much, or I tried to build a life with this person. Now that's just a waste, right? Or things like that. And so the fear of changing that environment, and part of it is like the devil, right? Mm-hmm. I know how to interpret this, and I know how to actually, somewhat control this situation because I'm familiar with it. And so that feels comfortable on a level to which I'm like, well, I can actually, to some extent, control the outcome here, because I know it. I know the terrain.
There's a comfort of routine. Yeah. Even in a bad situation.
The comfort of discomfort.
Right.
There, right. Yep. So I heard a quote one time that really resonated when it comes to betrayal. And that is that very often people will choose a familiar hell instead of an unfamiliar heaven.
Yeah.
Because it's scary, exactly for the reasons we're talking about. Okay, so it wasn't like super late in life, but you really built up a life.
I had actually I was doing pretty well, and I think I had mentioned the car accident or whatever. I was in a car accident with my first wife and Keegan, and he was very young, and I came out of that with a lot of medical bills and a relationship that was in trouble. And ultimately, when I was 40, I was divorced. So I was 40 years old.
There's the financial aspect there too, where it was like medical and divorce and alimony, and so like you were like basically wiped clean.
Yeah, and I remember working with my boss on something, and I was talking about something, and I remember him saying, "Wait, do you have any money?" And I was like, no.
I know when you told me like your financial situation, like you literally had nothing.
Right. I had nothing, and I had cashed everything in and done everything I could just to feed the family and pay legal fees and all of these different things. And I remember thinking at the time, I remember thinking at the time that like, I don't know how I'm going to make it from this point to the next. But somehow I did. Your budget, you really tie down, you go and buy a Stouffer's frozen lasagna, and you and your 6-year-old son eat that all week. You know what I mean? Because you make it on Sunday night, the family size or whatever. It's like $8.99 or whatever. It's dinner, dinner for a week. So you do all of those things. And I remember like it didn't take long for me to kind of start to figure it out financially.
Well, and to the point that I was making earlier where people kind of come in, you actually met with a financial advisor, and financial advisors get paid to
invest for you,
and to give you advice.
Right. And he even said, wait, you have no money.
Yeah. And so, but my point with that is you came from a place with divorce and basically having absolutely nothing,
right?
Going, you're facing the unknown. And having to make these decisions. You reach out to somebody that normally you would have to pay money to.
Yeah.
And he was kind enough and generous enough to actually help you anyway.
Right. Yeah.
And so
it did help that he was an ex-helicopter pilot too. So, but I didn't know that at the time. Like, we learned that at lunch. Yeah.
But that's my point, is that you stepped into the unknown. You were kind of forced into it, but you had to trust it because there was, you didn't really have another choice.
That's right.
And then God worked it out anyway. And so I think that's what's so scary, is like trusting that things can fall into place when you are willing to do that, take that step.
Right.
And so think about God, like knowing 20 years before this happened that you were going to meet with this person and giving you guys a similar history to connect on, giving, whatever he did in this man's life to give him empathy and compassion, that he connected with you,
right?
And then waived his initial fees or whatever it was that he did.
Yep.
Right. And then you are still working with him today because he's been wonderful.
Yeah, he's been awesome. He's helped us out through a lot of different things. So yeah, it was very scary. And I remember thinking, how am I going to, and I ended up taking a promotion, but it required a move to come to Ohio, because that was like that. All of a sudden that opportunity presented itself, and I was unaware of that. I wasn't looking at a relocation or anything like that, but that opportunity presented itself, and ultimately it's worked out very well. I think obviously I was broken emotionally coming out of that relationship and that situation, which certainly manifested itself in bad areas. But there was alimony that I had to cover, which was significant, and it was something that I committed to because I felt like it was the right thing to do. So much so that my attorney actually disagreed with me so much, he wrote me a letter, and it was like a 3-page letter with all the things that he disagreed with me on. And I felt like it was the right thing to do to carry through on that amount. And it was hard. It was a very hard
financial commitment
that came out of that. But I felt like it was the right thing to do. I felt like it was the right thing to do for Keegan. As he grew, he would, if he had to ask questions like, hey, why doesn't she have, never had to worry about that because we had made a commitment to help her. And, oddly enough, because I had that experience when we were going through, what we were going through, I think I even said to you, I was like, hey, no matter what happens, I'm going to make sure you're okay. And I remember going through that. Now, part of that was formed out of the experience I had, because I knew it would be okay. I'd figure it out. I'd figure out how to live. I'd figure out how to do all of that.
That's a really good point. When you start practicing this, you begin to trust it more.
Yeah.
So the first time you step into something unknown, it's like the scariest thing you've ever done.
Right.
And it's not that it's not scary the next time, but you now have proof that when you relax into that, it's okay. So, things happen. You make decisions that you wouldn't make if you stayed in the same environment. You meet people that you wouldn't meet in the same environment. Opportunities come your way that wouldn't be there in the same environment.
Right.
And on a spiritual perspective, if you're Christian and you have, that spiritual belief system, we look at this and go, well, God really orchestrated things in a way that you stepped into trust and he provided.
Right.
He answered like all of the needs that you had through different people and different opportunities. And it worked out.
Worked out very well. Yeah. Worked out. I mean, financially, there are no concerns anymore. I mean, we're no different than any other family. You have to, take care of things, and you have to pay bills, and you have to do, and you can't get overextended and all that stuff. But
you made up, you went from like totally broke, and people ended up supporting you and helping you. You stepped into the fear of almost being a single parent, almost completely being a single parent for a long time before we met. And that worked out. And then you also took the step into, okay, well, I'm going to move. And then, and that's how we met.
Right.
And so,
and ultimately, professionally, that worked out as well. So. Yeah.
So that's a couple examples there. And I've shared this too before. When I got divorced, we were not making a lot of money. The two of us combined did not make a significant amount of money. And so when I found everything out and then looked in our bank account, I think we had a total of $2,000 in our savings. And I took $1,000 and I left. And, I lived with my parents for a long period of time after that, and things shifted for me. And and so there's, going back to what we were talking about earlier, the environment is not the dictator of the outcome. It's really more about willingness to make changes and that mindset about belief, whether things will be okay or whether you believe they won't be okay. Now, you will live into that.
Now, why did you think things would be okay?
Oh my gosh. Now to be fair, I immediately moved back in with my parents. So I did feel like I had that.
A safety net.
I did feel like I had that as an option. I don't know if I lived away from them, what I would have done if I would have gone to a friend's house, or I'm not sure what I would have done, but basically as soon as I found out, I left. There was not like a deep thinking process, but I actually, now that when I'm thinking about it, I actually remember my initial thought was, I'm going to go to their house for the weekend. And here's one of the things I think that's really important. When I got the separation, things got really clear and I was like, I'm not going back. So when I actually had the distance for a couple of days, then I was like, no, this is, I'm done. And I think that's actually really important, because I think when we stay in the environment that's not healthy for us, things are so clouded that if we can separate in some way for a period of time, if we have the ability to do that, that can provide incredible clarity.
It can. Yeah, it really can. You get a moment to sit alone in solitude and think, and maybe get some advice from folks who aren't as emotionally tied into the situation.
Well, and I think part of the reason that is true is because if you get out of an environment that is not safe and you get into an environment that provides some stability and safety, your nervous system and your brain start resetting towards that and feeling that and remembering that. And it goes, oh no, I don't actually want to come out of that safety anymore. Right. Like it's like a reminder that that's possible. Right. And so I do think sometimes that getting out of the environment can be really helpful. But I had a job, I was making money, and
you could eat.
Well, and I could have
sleep.
Right. And I could have always, the summer before I went to college, I worked and then I took a second job. Right. And so, I could have gotten another job had I needed to at that point and all that kind of stuff. And what I ended up doing was going back to school. And
well, what's interesting, and as we're talking through this, we're both talking about previous relationships, and in the previous relationships, the assumption is they weren't hard, they weren't right, they were hard, they weren't right because they ended in divorce, right? I would say that neither one of us was in physical danger. And correct. So there's always a challenge. And I don't want to send the message to people that because there are some very hard situations
that are
worse. Yeah. And we want to make sure that people know that we're not just telling you to disregard safety. We're not just telling you to
oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? There are some situations out there that are very difficult to extricate yourself from.
I think we're mostly speaking towards some level of stability in the relationship to that extent, meaning there's not, there's not violence present. There's not, right.
Yeah. Kidnapping threats and things like that. Right. And so, I mean, those are things that require, a higher levels of support. And we're not speaking on those things. I think where we're coming from is, you'll hear people talk about staying in relationships because of finances, or staying in relationships because of the house, or stay, you know what I mean, or something like that. Or
that goes into the idea of, that goes, so clarifying the foundation that we're speaking from is typically like a quote unquote normal setting where there's some level
of dysfunction that's happening.
It's unhealthy, or you're unhappy, or there's been infidelity, or whatever, a lot of fighting or whatever, but there's no like physical safety dangers and things like that. So, but from that place, it goes in how we live our life. And this is whether you are in a relationship that you want to get out, but we don't even have to be speaking to that. If you're talking about stepping into the unknown, I mean, this really can apply to everybody. It's not just people that are, wanting to get divorced or anything like that. The way we live our lives reflects what our values are. And so recognizing on a conscious level what our values are can really help us when we want to make decisions that are hard. And so what you just said is people will make decisions based on their highest value. And sometimes the highest value is, I don't want to leave my house. Sometimes the highest value is, I don't want my financial situation to change, right? Yeah. You make different decisions if your highest value is freedom.
Agreed. Yeah.
So for example, like you had mentioned in your situation, now you were kind of thrust into it, but in your situation, you were saying, that you financially were really, really tight, and then you had to make different decisions. Would you have rather stayed financially comfortable? Absolutely. Would you have rather, not eaten, some of the frozen dinners that you did for the period of time that you were right? Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
But the outcome of that ended up being so positive for you once you moved through it. And that's the thing too, is I think we view every hard situation as another stuck place, when it's really every emotion we have, every situation we have is something that we have the potential to move through. And on the other side of all of those emotions, on the other side of all those fears, on the other side of all those experiences is the real true potential for joy, for safety, for security,
improve self-esteem, all of these different things. I often think about, and I know you've got some more things to cover here, but like the addict will, stepping into a life of sobriety and recovery is unknown for folks who have been in that pattern of behavior for as long as a lot of people.
Their brain is literally like, I want to go back to the addiction because it's the familiar. It's the safe.
It's comforted me for however long you were in that. So when you step into that, you go, oh, I don't know what this is going to look like. Does this look like I have to live in the woods? Like I remember I made that joke, like I'm an addict, I have to like chain myself to the toilet, or something like that. Like you just don't know.
I transform at midnight.
Yeah, right.
Full moon.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, I remember thinking that like, what was going to happen? Was I going to be drawn? And then over time, you're like, well, no, now I have improved self-esteem. I'm looking at myself in the mirror. My health is improving.
Well,
all of these things. So
talking about getting out of the environment too, I think, so if you know what your true value is, at that point, your highest value was recovery. And so you were willing to make the hard decisions to step into that.
Right.
Once you get away from the environment and you get a little bit of clarity, you start to see that there's more opportunity and more potential. And so in a lot of aspects, you get out of the environment, you make the hard choice, not knowing what the outcome is going to be and afraid of a lot of things. But then you end up experiencing more energy, more mental clarity, more health, better sleep, right? Because you have to remember, when you were in a situation where you were internally conflicted all the time, that system is constantly running in the subconscious, and that is incredibly exhausting.
Yeah.
When you have an internal fight against your parts, or against yourself, or against your highest self, or against your purpose, or however you want to term that, whatever resonates with you. But that internal conflict and that back and forth is a place of indecision in your body because there's conflict. And in your energetic state, in your energetic field, in your energetic body, that is incredibly draining.
Yeah.
It takes all of your energy, resources to be in a place of indecision. When you bring your value system up into your consciousness and out of your subconscious, because you're living into your value system subconsciously, whether you know it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So when you bring it up into your conscious, that's when you can say, okay, I'm living into my value system this way, but consciously, I want to shift this and start living into a different value system. Then you've made a decision, and that decision alone, even though it comes with some difficulties, brings back so much energy into your body.
Yeah.
And so I know there's a lot of fear sometimes around like that aspect of it, right? And I think it's recognizing, going back to the power of belief, the power of mindset, right? And I'm going to give a lot of examples of that actually, because I think it's really important.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So I'll give one example I just think is like absolutely mind-blowing and awesome. It was one of my mentors was a celiac, like legit celiac. She's a medical doctor who had chronic pain and a diagnosed celiac condition, meaning she's like legitimately allergic to gluten. Okay. She's been through this transformative process of working on mindset, working on beliefs, stepping into fear, becoming more aligned with who she is, stepping into her purpose, working on addressing all of her limiting beliefs about herself, about life, about all this kind of stuff, processing them, releasing trauma, getting it out of her body, and going through all of this work, that you and I talk about all the time. And she has made a long-term commitment to that. And it's been a process of several years. Well, one of the goals she set for herself, talking about the power of the mind, was I'm not going to be a celiac anymore. You go, okay, that's not a reversible disease. People have that for life,
Yeah.
right? I'm telling you, I watched her eat gluten, and she's fine. She has successfully, over time, working on both the emotional and mental aspect of it, as well as supporting her body through slow exposure and things like that, to the point where she doesn't just eat it to not have a reaction to show people that she can do it. She will eat it periodically, consistently throughout her life now because she can. She made a decision several years ago that that's where she was going to end up. Yeah. Just think about that. You've been told that you have a disease that is irreversible. She's a medical doctor, so she knows the science behind it. She decides that that's not going to be her life outcome and that her body can heal. She takes the steps to change all of the brain patterns and the fears. I mean, she used to have gluten and have to immediately go to the bathroom, right? And be like, listen, I can't even be like in the same room with this stuff. You can't give me a bite of it. I can't have an exposure to it, or I'm going to have to be in the bathroom, right? She changed all of her brain patterns associated with that behavior of, if I eat gluten, I'm in the bathroom, right? And the fears associated about that, and the physical responses associated with the fears, right? And the nervous system response and all of that. I mean, there's so much that goes into that.
Yeah.
And she piece by piece slowly unraveled that, addressed all of it, and then eats it, no problem. She's fine. Her body doesn't react to it anymore.
That reminds me of that lady we heard talking about kind of mindset again, and how you go about, stepping into the unknown, and the notion of cancer being in remission or cancer being healed. So when you tell a cancer patient that they're now in remission for 5 years,
you're in remission, and you have a 5-year window where it might come back. And so we're going to monitor you.
Yeah. And so it's clinical, right? It's very clinical and it's programmed and stuff like that, but it puts those cancer survivors, patients, into fear. Fear, oh my gosh, it's going to come back. What's the next?
What's my skin going to say? Is it coming back?
Yeah.
Well, and we've experienced
that. And it lowers your immune system and makes it, versus if you say, hey, your cancer's healed, we're going to do some scans on you, and we're going to figure it out.
We'll just keep track of you.
Yeah, and we'll address it, if we see something else. And so it's a really that's very much an unknown as well to step into, post cancer. You're like, well, what's the unknown? What's this going to mean? And how you step into that unknown with confidence and belief and things like that.
Yeah, I think it is the belief, right? Which takes a lot of courage to say, I'm going to believe that something is possible that I haven't yet experienced.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like we were talking about earlier, the more you experience that things you think are impossible are possible, the more you start to actually believe it. But the first is really a step of faith because I don't know the outcome of that situation.
Right.
Right. Back to when I had my, I always want to say my first divorce. You and I have never been divorced, but when I got divorced, right. Knowing that I had been through that before when you and I were working together.
We've been working together on our divorce marriage thingy.
Processing everything.
Hear the wisdom?
There is a sense to which I was like, I know I can do it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And you know, and even, and you and I talked about this, I knew I could do it too.
Mm-hmm.
I knew we'd be okay. I knew we'd sell the house. I knew, you know, we'd figure it out. And then
a lot of processing to get to the point where I felt really strong in that, but
right, yeah.
I knew that was not an option. And I think when you live from a place of freedom versus a place of I'm stuck.
Yeah.
That is a different life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a different thought process.
Well, you know, what's interesting, and this just hit me. So we both were like, we can go off and do our thing and we'd be fine. But we choose to work on this. We choose to stay in this thing, and we choose to.
And there's fear both ways.
There's fear both ways.
I mean, but you remember we've talked about this too. Like you and I both had these moments where, like, I was like looking up apartments, right? And I was like, well, okay, like
things were painful.
And I was thinking through it, right? I was like, okay, well, you know, I run my own business, okay, but I'd probably have to get a second job to, like, you know, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, well, you know, thinking through, like, okay, is that ideal? I wouldn't love it. You know, I might be tired. Like, could I do it? You know? And so, but then it worked out that I didn't have to, but I knew that I could, if I needed.
Well, I think it made it created a lightness on, a degree of lightness as we interacted with each other, because not that it was all roses, because it certainly was not. But as we took the fear of finances and lodging, away.
Yeah.
And so once that's gone, then you go, you know, because a house is just a house. You know, everything that we poured into this house in 100 years, nobody's going to even remember. Right. It's going to be occupied by a different family. It might even be torn down, you know, and all of these things. And so, like, I think what happens is a lot of times you see people in relationships.
It's like that, right? Like where you're talking about the house, like we had just built it.
We had just built it. We
right. And so, so then you're facing divorce and separation. You go, but I just built this house, and it's just a house.
It is just a house. What matters is your emotions and your relationships and things like that.
And your safety.
And your safety, right.
Mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Yep.
Yeah. So another example of this, because we mentioned earlier age, right? I think I was divorced very early in my 20s. You got divorced right around 40. You know, and I hear what's interesting is I will hear the same fears and the same doubts and the same insecurities from women at so many different ages, like all across the spectrum, right? I think it's just a humanity fear, right? And we allow the older we get to say, well, no, but this is justifying this fear because I'm older, or, you know, but we all have the same fears, and the outcomes can always be different than we think they will be. And so here's an example of that. I know personally a woman who was, and I don't know the exact age, but I want to say mid to late 60s when she had gone through betrayal and decided to get a divorce, and mid to late 60s. And she's living her best life. She owns her own condo. And she had, if I remember correctly, and I'm not going to get like all the details or the numbers or anything like that, but, you know, one of her you know, fears is what we've talked about. Finances are a big one, right? And she was like, I don't know, like, you know, this is going to be tight, you know, and she certainly, I don't think was going to live at the level that, you know, they would have had they stayed together. Right. But she made the decision that this marriage was unhealthy for her. And this was late 60s. And again, talking about how God ends up working things out, she did not know that this is something that was going to happen, but there was, I think, some family member or something happened where she ended up getting, I think it might've been her dad or something like that. She ended up getting like a little bit of an inheritance from that. And so that cushioned a little bit of her finance. And when she got divorced, she still works. And I think she got another job and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And so, but the thing is, she's so much happier. You're so much happier. And I think we forget, because we get stuck in the fear part, that there can be true happiness and joy on the other side. If the thing that we're afraid of is something that we know deep down we should be doing, like if that's the purpose that we need to live into on the other side of that choice, then even as scary as that choice is, climbing that wall and getting on the other side is going to bring that energy. It's going to bring that joy. It's going to bring that happiness, that lightness, even when it's so hard. And I remember going through my divorce, the incredible energy shift that I had after separating from that relationship. I was like a different person from being in the relationship to being out of the relationship. And my emotions were happier. My energy was better. I just loved life more again. And so I think we forget sometimes in that place of indecision and fear, even just on an energetic frequency level, those are draining to the body, physically draining. The frequency of those emotions is incredibly draining. And so when we are able to move through them because we believe it's the right thing to do, and we get on the other side, then the frequency and the energy completely shifts. Yeah. And so if that's, what you're hoping for, then that's a good example of that.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk through kids. Having been through a divorce, where there was a child involved, I think a lot of times folks will say, well, I've got to stay together for the kids and things like that. And you absolutely have to consider that. You absolutely have to think that through. And you have to understand, are you bailing too soon? You know what I mean? Your kids are there. I mean, they really aren't.
Clear. Like the point of this episode isn't like, oh, you should go get divorced.
That's
like,
right. That's not at all.
The idea is if you should do something and fear is holding you back.
Right.
That's okay.
And so what happens is kids do well when there's emotional health surrounding them.
And safety and emotional health.
Right. And so you can teach them that, you can work through that. And sometimes that means that the relationship will gain a emotional health by staying together and working through some hard things. And that's a great example for your children, right? To say, hey, listen, there's a hard thing we went through. Look at how we both, and look at the reconciliation that happened. That's a wonderful lesson to give your children. On the flip side, you can show up better for your kids when you're in a little bit more emotional health. So if there's no chance of you
even like demonstrating like doing hard things, making the hard decision.
That's right. So and
it's like thinking about, okay, if your child is in this situation, what do you want to model for them in their life? Right. Yeah.
So I think, I often think, our kids are really smart and they want us to be happy. They also want their needs met. And those are hard to kind of ascertain, both of those things. And, there's the fearful situations can do all of those things if you step into them. And once again, we're not sitting here advocating for divorce or for staying.
Or either one. It's like, if you know inside of you what the right decision is and you're scared of doing it, that's kind of what we're talking about.
So people will say, well, and I said this, well, I have to stay together for Keegan.
Yeah.
And it turns out he was okay. And, with the split, there were some hard things that he went through and stuff like that. But ultimately, it was okay.
Yeah. These are hard decisions. It's fear is a real thing. And I think what we're trying to communicate, like at the core of it, is that you're here for a reason. And if there's a lot of conflict internally, we just want to bring that up to the surface in terms of bringing into your consciousness, like, why am I making the decisions that I'm making? Where is that coming from?
Right.
Because if there's conflict, then there's a decision to be made. And again, one way or the other, right? There's so many nuances, and like, we're not telling you what to do at all.
Right.
But we've been in both and we've made both, and it's different for everyone. Right. And there can be even situations like kind of in the middle where you go, we're not going to live as a married couple, but we're staying together because we have a healthy enough dynamic and we want to provide that, unification for the children in the home, or, there's like many, and that's the thing. There's so many different variables. So it's not, stay together or get to, like, there's so many different ways, but the idea is, what is it that you are here for? And are there things in your life that are keeping you from living into, your purpose and who you're supposed to be, and if you stay with somebody and it's not a typical relationship and you find something that's the in between, but that allows you to maybe have some financial stability between the two of you, and it's mutually agreed upon, and you've clearly communicated what those boundaries are, and then you go off and live your best life and get new friendships and have some more creativity because you're not feeling stuck because it's a choice, right? I think that's another thing too, is like when we feel like we don't have choices, we feel very stuck, and that's a totally different place to be than I'm choosing this because of XYZ, I'm good with it, and now I can be who I need to be, right? And again, it's like that energy and frequency level of like fear versus no, I'm here because I want to be here, right? And so okay, so one more story, and then just a couple other like inspirational examples for people. So there was a woman who wanted, when she was younger, to convert to Christianity, and her family did not want her to do that. They didn't believe that was the right decision, and her grandmother threatened her with taking away her college fund, and it just was not, they weren't supportive of her decision to become a Christian. Well, she really felt called and wanted to become a Christian and get baptized, so she did it anyway. And true to her word, her grandma took away her college fund, and her mom grounded her for 2 years. Now, I don't know what that looked like in terms of like, that meant that she couldn't like hang out with her friends or whatever. And she even said when she told this story, she's like, I want to be fair to my mom. She kind of felt like maybe I was getting into a cult or something like that. Like she, so she wasn't saying, she wasn't like hating on her mom or anything when she was telling the story, but she said, okay, so I converted because I felt like it was the right thing to do. So here's an example kind of in the context of this episode of like, talk about scary, but she felt like this is my purpose. This is who I'm supposed to be, I'm going to make this choice, even though I have literal life changes, forced on me because of this choice, right? And so she did it. So then her college fund was taken away. She was able to go to college anyway, using some scholarships, but she did still have to take out some loans. At college, she met her husband, and then her in-laws asked her, hey, do you have any college loans? We've actually been saving money for years for a niece who doesn't actually need the money. They found out like the niece is set, whatever, doesn't need the money. She said, yeah, actually, I do have some loans. They covered the exact amount of loans that she had. So just like it like ties a pretty little bow on the idea of the fear of the unknown, losing things that you love and care about, or that make your life comfortable, or that set up your future the way that you currently think is the only way. And then God having a totally different plan. Yeah. How many years had he been working on the in-laws to save this money to answer this question for her? Right. Yeah. And to provide love and support and security. And in a way, in an option that she never, ever, ever would have seen had she been locked into, there's only one way to accomplish going to college. There's only one option, one future, one choice for me. She chose in the most scary way to do something that she believed in wholeheartedly. And spiritually, she probably almost felt like she didn't have a choice, right? Like if she felt called. And so she made that decision, and then it's like the universe started shifting, right? The things started aligning for her in a way that never would have happened if she wasn't willing to step into that unknown. Right. I think that's a really cool story.
That is a good story.
Yeah. So just a couple more inspirational examples. Again, not even relationally, not even about relationships or marriage, but Julia Child wrote her first cookbook at 39. Diana Boyle, Diana was, she's the woman that was on America's Got Talent at 47.
Susan Boyle.
Yeah, Susan Boyle. Why did I write Diana? Oh, that must have been a typo. Yeah. Susan Boyle. That's her name. Susan Boyle was on America's Got Talent, 47 years old. I mean, think about that. Like stepping into the unknown. That is so scary. You're not a performer. She hasn't been, right? Yeah. And then she like blew everybody's minds and had an album and got successful at 47. 47. Grandma Moses began her painting career at 78.
Mm-hmm.
She lived to be 101, by the way.
Nice.
So when you think like, oh, I only have so much time left, I think mindset and energy and living into your purpose plays a lot into that.
It does.
It really, really does. So Grandma Moses began her painting career at 78. She lived to 101 years old, and while she was alive, enjoyed success, but then obviously has continued to be well-known and successful after her death. But she enjoyed success that late in life. I just think that's amazing. And Laura Ingalls Wilder, author of Little House on the Prairie, began writing her books when she was 65 years old.
So 2 more. I know Colonel Sanders evidently didn't start KFC till he was like in his late 50s.
Oh, but that was one of those like knocking on doors.
Yeah.
To get it done. Right. Yeah. So
and then,
not instant gratification, but
right.
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood learned how to play classical piano in his 70s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
So like, there's a guy that, I mean, Clint Eastwood's still directing movies. He's in his 90s. You know what I mean? So like whether you like his movies or not, there's a guy that keeps reinventing himself and doing different things and, getting out there and doing stuff. So yeah, I think age is a number.
And take all of those. If they didn't believe that they could do it, they wouldn't have tried.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't believe that you have what it takes to start a restaurant business, you're not going to do it.
That's right.
If you don't think that piano is interesting or that it's a possibility that you can learn that late, if you go, I'm 65, it's too late to learn piano, right? You're never going to try.
Yeah.
And so
yeah,
I hope that's encouraging.
Well, you hear people do that. They'll be like, "Yeah, I wish I'd learned to play piano when I was younger." But like, why not now? Now there are some things that pass you by. Like you're like, I want to be an elite marathon runner, and I'm 88 years old.
Olympics.
Yeah, like okay, that may not happen, but
Sure.
but there are some things that people limit themselves based on maybe what society tells them or whatever.
But I think that's the whole point. The world is full of possibilities. It's full of possibilities, and fear says that there's only one outcome, and it's a negative outcome. But beyond the wall of fear are like hundreds of possibilities, many of which are full of joy, full of happiness, full of security, new friendships, new financial opportunities, just new everything.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of what we want to leave you with today. We don't know what the answer is for you. We have no idea, but I do know, and I can tell you that you have an inner knowing inside of you. And my encouragement is to always commit for the rest of your life to listen to that, because the more we suppress it, the more mental and physical harm we do to ourselves over time, because that part that speaks to you is speaking for your health, for your well-being, to live into your purpose and to be the strongest, happiest, best version of you. Yeah. And if we ignore it, there is an energetic shift in our body because of that. And so the more we do it, the more the energy shifts and, the frequency changes, and there's a lot of unhappiness that comes with that. So I don't know what it's telling you. Only you know what it is telling you. But I would encourage you to just sit with it for a little while, be still with it, listen to it, drop into your body and go, what is it really trying to tell me to do? Because I think most of us, when we get still enough, know what that answer is.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to step into that fear and that unknown. Don't, for the addicts, because I represent all addicts. Don't be afraid to step into that path of healing, because you'll never know, and I've said this before, the amount of freedom I feel and the amount of joy that I feel, every day, knowing that that's no longer part of my life is not at all what I expected when I started the journey. I think what I felt,
I don't think I could anticipate where we are.
Yeah. What I felt was, okay, I'll get to a point where I'm not doing it, but I didn't understand all of the, second, third, fourth order effects, extremely positive effects that would come out.
I guess the last thing I would say too is, if this is something that you're kind of like, okay, well, this all sounds great, but I have no idea how to do this. Like my brain patterns are totally rooted in one way, and I'm comfortable in my discomfort, and maybe I recognize that, but that's as far as I can get. I totally understand that. Again, this takes practice, right? So doing it with the small things first, and then building on that, and learning how to trust yourself, and that learning how to trust that things will be okay starts maybe in smaller things. But if that's you, reach out to a trauma therapist or a coach or, somebody, create that support system, because they can help guide you and challenge you. And again, the brain is malleable. It's constantly, the ability for the brain to change is phenomenal. And the power of the mind and the thoughts that it has on our future, on our present, and on our physical and mental health is huge.
It is.
And so if we're stuck in patterns that are not serving us, reaching out to people that can help us change those patterns and challenge those and, support you as you take those brave steps into the unknown can be really, really helpful. So I would encourage you to do that. If you are a betrayed spouse that wants to work one-on-one with a coach, I do work one-on-one with betrayed women. So feel free to reach out. There's a link in the show notes. But whether it's me or someone else that you feel like is a good fit for you, we cannot go through this life alone. And I think fear is one of those things that really grabs onto us when we feel isolated. And so the more we can get into a supportive community, the more we can surround ourselves with people that have positive mindsets, belief that change is possible, belief in you and your capabilities, the more that then becomes a reality.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast interesting or helpful, it would mean so much if you leave a 5-star review or post a screenshot and share on social media. We are on a mission to share the message of recovery, and you can help get the word out. If you know a friend who could use this podcast, please share it.